Imagine dying in your apartment, and for over 2 years, nobody realizes you're gone. That actually happened to a woman named Joyce Vincent. In January of 2006, officials forced open the door of her apartment in North London because of unpaid rent. And inside, they found Joyce laying on the sofa. The television was still on. Christmas presents were sitting nearby. And she had been dead for more than 2 years. But here's what makes this story so hard to understand. Joyce wasn't someone who spent her whole life alone. She was only 38 when she died. Friends remember her as beautiful, funny, ambitious, and social. And she had good jobs. She went to restaurants, Wimbledon, and the opera. She loved music and dreamed of being a singer. And at one point, her life looked completely different from the way it eventually ended. In fact, in 1990, Joyce was backstage at a massive Nelson Mandela tribute concert at Wembley. And she actually met Nelson Mandela herself. What's crazy is that there's footage from that night where you can still see her for a few seconds, smiling, surrounded by musicians and celebrities. Millions of people could have seen her on television that night. And about 13 years later, she would die alone in her apartment, and nobody would know. So how does somebody go from that to completely disappearing? And nobody really knows the full answer. Over time, Joyce just kind of seemed to drift out of people's lives. She left her job, she spent time in a refuge for victims of domestic violence, and little by little, friends lost contact with her. But this is the part of the story that gets me. Her friends didn't forget about her. They didn't necessarily think that something terrible had happened. They just assumed that Joyce was somewhere else. One person who knew her specifically said that they basically thought she was off somewhere living a better life than they were. Meanwhile, her television kept playing, mail kept arriving, and life outside of her apartment kept moving. And behind that door, Joyce was still there. What's crazy is by the time she was finally discovered, investigators couldn't even determine exactly how she died. It had been too long. And that's what I can't stop thinking about. Joyce wasn't forgotten. Her friends still remembered her, and they still wondered what she was doing. They just thought she was somewhere else, living her life. Meanwhile, she had been sitting alone in that apartment for more than 2 years. The world didn't forget Joyce Vincent. It just never realized she was gone. Damn.